Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, the world's greatest horror movie podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Wake Up Heavy Recollections of Horror. This is Mark Bagley, your host, and today is the final episode of the third volume of the Why Didn't I Rent This series, and most likely the last episode of Season 2. I don't think I'll be able to squeeze in the second episode on the Spotlight Stephen King series this week, but definitely next week. We have a holiday on Monday and I think a little family trip prior to that, so I doubt I'll try and squeeze in a second episode. Anyway, this is Volume 3, Episode 3 of Why Didn't I Rent This on Jack Sholder's 1982 film Alone in the Dark.
Anything can happen when you're alone in the dark. Anything.
What happened?
They came through the window.
What came through the window? Oh my God.
Why is this happening?
Alone in the dark. Rated R.
Trying to utilize the old TV spots for some of these, especially in the Why Didn't I Rent This series, since they're 30 seconds as opposed to 2 minutes long, to cut down the time. I actually went back and listened to the very first episode of the Why Didn't I Rent This sub-series and kind of took mental notes on how I kept it short. That was just barely over 12 minutes, less than 13. And I am hoping to keep it brief this time. I also noticed while listening to that I had mentioned that I wouldn't be too concerned with editing and making everything perfect, and I kind of lost sight of that as well. So this is just going to come out as it comes out and not be structured and fiddled around with as much as, I guess, the last 7. Wait, no. Yeah. Oh, this is number 9. I don't know. What the fuck am I talking about?
There we go again.
So this is a film that obviously I didn't rent back in the VHS glory days. I was aware of the film. I think I assumed it was your basic slasher, and it does get called out as being that in a lot of reviews from that time. It has had
That doesn't sound right.
It has had a reassessment in more recent times, and because it's got some peculiar touches to it, and those are the things that, of course, appeal to me now, and most likely would have appealed to me as a kid. So again, when this came out on video in 1983 or 84, it's probably something I would have liked and watched a number of times. I would have been familiar with most of the actors, and it's got those odd touches. So, major fail on 13, 14, or 15-year-old me for not picking it up. I mean, it had a great poster image, which I'm pretty sure was used on most of the VHS boxes. But like I have mentioned, God knows how many times now, slashers were not my thing back then. And I have gone through a reassessment period myself. I don't know what that sound was.
What are you even talking about?
Where I do explore that subgenre more in detail these days. And that may become a different kind of why didn't I rent this in the next volume or so on a lot of those slashers that I passed up. I mean, I can think off the top of my head of some real interesting ones that I've seen and watched multiple times in the last 5 or so years, like The Burning, Madman, Sleepaway Camp. I mean, there's just a bunch that went. Obviously, they were trying to cash in on the whole summer camp killer on the loose idea, but they either have a brilliant novelty to them or an interesting cast, which is the case of The Burning. The novelty aspect would apply to Sleepaway Camp with its batshit crazy ending. That movie's been talked to death, but I don't know, maybe at some point I'll talk about 3 or 4 different ones in one episode super briefly as a why didn't I rent this, because there's a whole slew of slashers that I did not rent.
I think it's time for a break.
For my money, though, this isn't really a slasher. It's kind of half slasher, half home invasion. I've seen it described as part of the Maniacs on the Loose subgenre, and I don't know if that's just referring to slashers in general or if that encompasses a whole other subset of films. And I'm trying to think, when I read that, I read it 2 or 3 times in different articles online, or actually in one of my older books, but I couldn't come up with other examples that would fit that. And so I think they just mean basically slashers, a madman on the loose killing teens. Well, that's not this, really. We have 4 patients in a psychiatric hospital, mostly older. We have Jack Palance and Martin Landau, who at that time were already advanced in age, and then a couple of younger guys, but it's 4 mental facility patients who escape one night due to a blackout. And this is like the main kind of plot device of the film, is that they are locked in, all the cells are locked with electricity. And this seems like something that someone would have thought of and had a backup generator for this eventuality, but no, that's not the case. And they go to the house of their new psychiatrist because they believe that he killed their old one. So that's the basic plot outline. And I'll do my little reading at the end not from Psychotronic, but from another book that I think I've used once or twice before, The Phantom's Ultimate Video Guide. It has a pretty decent and positive review that's not too terribly spoilery.
I think it's time for a break.
So let's get into the cast and crew a little bit. This, as I mentioned, was directed by Jack Sholder, who previously had edited The Burning, which I just mentioned a minute or 2 ago, and went on to mainly work in TV. But he has a couple of interesting credits to his name, some movies from my past that I enjoyed. The movie right after Alone in the Dark that he directed was A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which is considered by many to be the strangest of the franchise. It's definitely the most homoerotic, and that was done on purpose by the screenwriter, but I guess Sholder didn't clue into it, so it's one of those films that has become kind of a camp classic because of that. And then he directed, right after that, a movie that I used to watch all the time called The Hidden with Kyle MacLachlan, where he plays an alien that comes to find another alien, and it's sort of a fish out of water tale with some good special effects and sci-fi stuff going on. And much like Extro, the last Why Didn't I Rent This episode, This was an early New Line Cinema production. Good old Robert Shaye, before Freddy Krueger put him and that company on the map. They had started out as a distribution company in the 60s, I believe, and he brought foreign films and art films to distribute mainly in universities, and probably mainly in universities on the East Coast, I would imagine. And then they got into production, all the way up through the Lord of the Ring.
That doesn't sound right.
Trilogy. And much like many early New Line Cinema productions, this has an appearance from Robert Shaye's younger sister, Lynn Shaye.
It's time for another tangent.
And, most horror fans recognize Lynn from the dozens and dozens of movies that she's been in. But in my mind, she'll always be the really crazy lady in Farrelly Brothers movies like There's Something About Mary and Kingpin. Of course, nowadays when I go back, I recognize her more readily in a lot of these early 80s horror films. But for a long time, that's all I recognized her from. And then the rest of the cast, I mentioned Jack Palance and Martin Landau. And we have Donald Pleasence, who once again is playing a psychiatrist, but very different than his role as Loomis in the Halloween films. We've got a real mellow, easygoing kind of, I always get the feeling, and of course I've only watched this movie 2 or 3 times, but I have it in my head that by the end of the film we find out he's actually one of the inmates, because he's just as weird as they are. But, I'll leave that up to you to see if that happens or not. But he is not the crazed Loomis character in this. He's much more easygoing, kind of funny, and very goofy. And then we've got a couple of 80s staples. If you're around my age, you will recognize these people immediately. As Dr. Potter, we have Dwight Schultz, who was Howling Mad Murdoch on the A-Team. He was in one of the iterations of Star Trek. I don't follow Star Trek, so I don't know which one. He has done tons of TV series and movie work, and apparently works a lot as a voice actor. If you look at his credit list on IMDb, it is, as many of those voice actors' credit lists are, very, very long. Along with Dwight Schultz, we have one of my favorite actors from my childhood, who was only in 4 movies, Erlind van Lidth. And he was in The Wanderers, which is a movie I didn't see until later on in life, but I always remember seeing his image. He was a 6'6" tall, 300-something pound former wrestler who had been born in the Netherlands and then moved to the United States when he was fairly young, and did some pro wrestling, and I think was supposed to be in the Olympics, but it was the year we boycotted, or one of the years we boycotted. So he was in The Wanderers, and I remember him mainly from Stir Crazy, which is a movie that I watched God knows how many times back then. And he played Grossberger, the big silent dude who was very menacing, and then he sings the lovely performance of Down in the Valley towards the end. And then, of course, most 80s people or horror fans or Stephen King fans will remember him as Dynamo in The Running Man. And that was his last movie role. He died shortly after the movie came out. And I think he was only like 34 years old. And it was, of course, heart failure, because he was a very large fella. We have Deborah Headwall as Nell Potter, the wife of Dr. Dan Potter. And she's done a lot of TV work. She was in a couple episodes of Homeland, which I don't recognize her from. And then we have Lee Taylor Allen, who plays Dr. Dan's sister, Tony, who comes to stay with them and offers a little side plot here with being sort of a new wave punk rocker, which leads them to go see the band The Sick Fucks somewhere in New Jersey. And then they have this side plot where her and Dr. Dan's wife go to demonstrate at a nuclear power plant and get arrested. And that sort of becomes a plot device later on in the film. And then we've got Elizabeth Ward, who plays the Potter's daughter, Lila. And then we have Brent Jennings, who plays Ray Curtis, one of the guards at the psychiatric hospital. And he went on to be, right now he's starring in that show Lodge 49, which I haven't watched, but looks really interesting, with Kurt Russell's son. He's been in a million things. I always remember him from Witness, tons and tons of other stuff, but he has been around for quite a while and acted in just all kinds of stuff. Oh, and I will be damned if I couldn't find a connection to Murder, She Wrote among the main cast and crew of this. So that only deserves half of the clip I normally use.
Murder, She Wrote rules.
I think it's time for a break.
Okay, here's the write-up from the Phantom's Ultimate Video Guide. I'll skip over the credit part because I've already discussed that. Here we go. Wacko war vet Jack. I'm here because I enjoy the social life. Palance and paranoid preacher Landau lead a quartet of crazies who run amok in Jersey during a blackout caused by a faulty nuclear power plant. Imperiled psychiatric aide Dwight, the A-Team Schultz, tries to protect his endangered family from the psycho's wrath, while nutty head doc Pleasence insists that his errant charges, whom he dubs Voyagers, are merely confused. Shoulder's sharp satiric splatter pick pokes fun at Langian shrinks, suburban life, punk rock, American media addiction, and voyeurism in general, and it features a brilliant opening nightmare sequence. The title applies as aptly to vicarious thrill-seeking bijou and home vid viewers as it does to the on-screen victim's situation. An almost seamless B-movie that's funny, scary, and equipped with a bright central metaphor. What more can we ask? And that fairly positive review brings up a couple of points that stick out to me. The opening sequence is amazing. Of course, I love dream stuff in movies, and you can't tell it's a dream for a little bit, and then it gets a little strange, and you're going, what the hell's going on? But it works nice. It's a nice segue into the life of the psychiatric patients in the hospital. And the subplots work well. They interweave. I didn't even really catch the connection of the power plant being the cause of the power outage. And of course, this is the power plant that they are protesting against. And then the punk rock aspect. I mean, this was early 80s, so that showed up on the sidelines in a lot of movies at the time, and it's not ever quite done very realistically. But, we get a couple of songs from the Sick Fucks, who were a real band apparently back then. And that comes back around at the end, which I won't spoil. And then we've got this odd coincidence where we have the 4 main psychiatric patients who go on this rampage, and 3 we know who they are, and then there's this one that they call the Bleeder, and he always keeps his face covered, but anytime he kills someone, his nose bleeds. And so this brings up kind of the mystery part, sort of the slasher part, although I still kind of say this leans more towards home invasion. But that gives us the surprise ending, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise to anybody. And it's interesting to note that he wears a hockey mask as his disguise when they break out. And this came out about 3 or 4 months after Friday the 13th Part 3, which was the first time that Jason wore the hockey mask in a Friday the 13th movie. And so I doubt very highly that this was any kind of appropriation of that, because I'm sure that, movies, low-budget movies can be made fairly quickly, but I doubt that it was between August and November that the whole thing was shot and edited and put out in the theater. So it's just kind of a weird sort of happenstance. And I would say they would possibly make a great double feature together with 2 hockey mask killers from 1982. This is definitely a movie that I will be watching again. I would recommend this to horror fans and to slasher fans. It might be a little slow in parts, and there are a lot of plots and subplots, but it makes for an interesting ride. Check this one out. I don't think it's streaming anywhere currently. I can't remember where I caught it the first time, probably on YouTube, but it was on TCM Underground recently, and that is what brought it to mind. Okay, thank you for following along this season. The next episode should be the second Stephen King episode, which will be mainly about Carrie, The Shining, and The Dead Zone, and that should be out next week, I would imagine, depending on how travel and holiday stuff goes. And I think that is it for now. I was looking at episodes over the weekend and realized that Season 2 had twice as many episodes as Season 1. So, again, another reason to kind of tap the brakes a little bit. And my apologies if the player image on this is confusing to anyone. I didn't use the WDIRT logo just because I was fiddling around and found that this image worked so nicely with the main logo. And I like how it reads, "Wake Up Heavy, Alone in the Dark." Bonus on that. Alrighty, if you're of a mind to, please rate and review Wake Up Heavy on whatever platform you happen to listen to it on. And we will see you again soon. Don't forget to wake up heavy.